Welcome to Contemporary Retirement. Contemporary Retirement is a public interest program focused on the retirement community. Every program has segments on legal, financial, and health issues affecting the retirement community. Contemporary Retirement is sponsored in part by a major grant from the Family Heritage Trust Company.
Contemporary Retirement is sponsored by Family Heritage Trust Company. The Family Heritage Trust Company is an independent bank chartered trust company established by local professionals to provide fiduciary services including fee-based investment advice, trust services, retirement planning, and tax planning. The Family Heritage Trust Company is committed to client service in our communities. For more information, call the Family Heritage Trust Company at 301-631-5900.
Contemporary Retirement is sponsored in part by a grant from R. Thomas Murphy & Associates, P.C. R. Thomas Murphy & Associates is one of Franklin County's leading law firms, emphasizing estate, trust, elder law, and medical assistance planning.
Welcome to the Is It Legal feature on Contemporary Retirement. Is It Legal focuses on the legal issues affecting the retirement community. With me today is Tom Murphy from the R. Thomas Murphy Law Firm with offices in Waynesboro, Chambersburg, and McConnellsburg. Welcome to the show, Tom.
Good morning, Mike.
Tom, we always like to do a segment on urban myths, and one of the reasons we do urban myths is it seems like these myths never die.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. You hear the same thing over and over again, year to year, and it doesn't go away.
So we talked a little bit last week about revocable trust. Let's do a quick recap. What is a revocable trust?
Revocable trust is nothing more than a holding tank for assets with a script and the trustee that if the person putting the money in there wants to undo it, they can revoke it and do away with it.
These things are being sold as if they protect their assets from long-term care costs. Is that your exposure in Pennsylvania?
No, it's completely available. And so if you just read the document, in most cases it says the settlor can take everything out, which means it's all available at any time.
They just simply do not work. And one of the problems is that in Maryland, you put the house in the trust, which for a married couple was automatically protected, now becomes an available resource.
Exactly, and Pennsylvania is the same way. So something that was protected and which we would move to the healthy spouse now is countable and the state's fighting over it.
So we don't, we've talked last week and we have to reiterate, it doesn't mean you necessarily have to get rid of it, but they tend to have a couple of poison pills, irrevocable upon incapacity, or only the person who created it can revoke it.
No, excellent points, because if only the person who created it can revoke it and they have a stroke, that's going to be an impossibility. Or if at the time you need to get the thing undone, it becomes irrevocable, we have a problem as well.
So the fact is it can be fixed. We tend to not use them except in multi-state real estate. Well, when I'm doing one of my presentations and someone always raises their hand and says, well, yeah, but you haven't talked about that gold-plated plan, the irrevocable trust, meaning you cannot revoke it.
No. Well, they're out there, and in some cases they're appropriate, but for most families they're not, because you can't get access to the principal unless you open the trust up.
Well, so what we mean here is if a person has an assisted living bill, $50,000 a year pretty much in this area, and they put $1 million in the trust, that trust can only distribute income to them. And income today might only be 2%, which means it could only distribute it $20,000. Where are they going to have the money to pay the balance of the $30,000 assisted living bill?
Well, it's an excellent point. And so someone who would ordinarily be very comfortable and well off is now essentially impoverish themselves arbitrarily.
And so the fact is, though, is that they say, well, I can solve that. I can say, well, they could distribute some principal to me to help pay an assisted living bill.
Sure.
What happens under the rules if that provision, which seems like a totally innocuous provision, is in that trust?
Right, it sounds perfectly fine, but the reality is you've made that trust, that irrevocable trust, completely available. The federal courts have held that if you can get $1 of principal, you can get access to the entire amount.
Well, or maybe what it really says, it's an available resource, even though it's not an available resource, right. Meaning that the court says and the government says, it's your money, well, I can't get it. Well, yes, you can, in a manner of speaking, and so it totally does not work.
Yeah, you get into these circular arguments where, yeah, it says you can't, but the state says that, which means you would otherwise be eligible, but now you can't because of this large chunk of money that the state says you own.
And one of the problems that we have here, and both in revocable trust and irrevocable trust, they're almost always written by estate planners, meaning they're written by people who are designed to transfer assets to the next generation without a focus on how are we going to deal with the current generation's health issues?
Yeah, and that's really our focus. And a lot of the estate planning that was created to avoid those taxes had much different numbers. And so the average American is not going to have to deal with all those fancy provisions in order to avoid death tax. And so the reality is long-term care costs really should be your focus, because that's what's potentially the highest risk.
Well, we look at a family saying 1 in 4 chance of a 3-year nursing home stay. In our region, that's about a $350,000 risk, and they have to be prepared to deal with those risks. And and too often they put the cart in front of the horse. All I'm worried about is now providing an inheritance to my children and sacrificing my personal security.
Well, exactly. Or the well-being of your spouse, because if you're in the nursing home and we have you on benefits, who's taking care of your spouse and how is he or she living?
When we deal with married couples, for instance, both in Pennsylvania and Maryland, you can basically protect all of the assets. So putting assets in a trust creates periods of ineligibility and puts them at risk. They're not going to have adequate resources to take care of themselves.
Yeah, and you made a good point earlier about the interest rates currently are just so low. Even on $1 million, you're not throwing off a lot of income, and that can really impact the quality of life for an individual.
So we always focus on security first. Asset protection is one of our goals, but it's not the first goal. First goal is always to make sure the individuals that are our clients, the parents, are secure.
Absolutely. That makes it really simple for us to do our job.
Tom, as always, thanks for taking time to appear on the program.
You're welcome.
More from Contemporary Retirement after these messages.
Few things in life are as important as family. Leave your insurance worries to us. Write Gardner. Call or visit our website to learn how we can make insurance simple and more affordable.
Every life that meets its end leaves a heart for love to mend. Sister, brother, family, friends are left to carry on. When the loss seems more than you can bear, it's nice to know that we'll be there at Douglas A. Fiery Funeral Home. We care.
Call Ed Lowe to help put your mind at ease.
Welcome to the special guest feature on Contemporary Retirement. This segment focuses on various issues which are of importance to the retirement community. My guest today is Jason Malott, Register of Wills, Washington County. Welcome to the show, Jason.
Thank you, Mike, for having me.
Yeah, Jason, you and I kind of joke from time to time that there's all these urban myths out here that would seemingly, if they were true, would inspire people to go get wills, but they still believe it, but they still don't go get wills.
That's for sure. I try to impress upon people all the time. It's very important to have a will.
And one of the ironies is if you don't have a will, the state wrote one for you.
That's correct. Our code does have a will written for everybody, and it may not put the assets where you want them to go when you die. So that's the most important reason to have a will.
Well, there's this assumption among a lot of people who, justify not getting the effort of getting a will that, well, everything will go to my spouse. The answer is maybe yes, maybe not.
That's right. That's correct. If you die with a spouse and adult children or even minor children and you have no will, that estate's going to be split.
And it would depend on, how the titling of things are. So many times the house is titled jointly and it would go to the surviving spouse. But most people are quite surprised to find out, even though they say they own everything joint, many times they don't own everything joint.
Quite often we get folks in that they find a title to a vehicle, even property sometimes. They thought they've deeded it a second marriage or something. They've deeded it over to the new spouse and it didn't occur. And they find themselves in probate.
Well, and then, the person receives a piece of property from a parent. It almost always goes strictly to the child, not to the child and their spouse, and they go to sleep at the wheel on this.
That's correct. Yes, it sometimes is handed down like that, and They just don't realize that that's what's occurred. When the death occurs, then they're surprised.
Now, one of the ironies of this is there is a perception that if you don't have a will, the state is going to get everything.
No, absolutely not. About the only difference is there's some additional paperwork, which is very limited, but otherwise the fees are the same. You might have to go to judicial probate with the orphans court, but that even anymore is a rarity because there's so many forms that are allowed for folks to consent for others to serve, that even if you die without a will, the state does not get any more money.
And ironically, those people that believe the urban myth, it still doesn't inspire them to go get a will.
That's for sure. And folks still think there's inheritance taxes. And for the majority of estates in Maryland, there is no inheritance tax.
Yeah, and I say that zero, nada, none. Husband and wife, how much is the inheritance tax?
None, zero.
And how about between parents and children?
Nothing, no inheritance tax.
You know, of course, in our society today, we have, stepchildren and so
Right.
forth. So, one spouse ends up with all the assets, divides it among their two children and their two stepchildren. What's the inheritance tax there?
Still exempt from inheritance tax.
So
no tax.
stepchildren count as if they're children. In
Correct.
fact, many families treat them the same.
That's exactly right.
Now, of course, you don't have a will and it goes to your brother or your sister. Any inheritance tax there?
No, they're also exempt. Now, their spouses are not, but they are exempt.
But now we get the little clinker here. You have a brother or sister, they've predeceased you, and the share that is now going to them now is going to the niece and the nephew.
Right, and they are taxable at 10%. That's called a collateral inheritance tax, and that is one tax that is still in effect in Maryland.
Friends and neighbors.
10%.
So you do need to pay attention to some of this stuff. And then, of course, we have people who want to benefit their church or, a local charity, and they don't bother to get a will. Is that going to happen?
No, absolutely not. And I tell folks, that the family will come in and say, well, Mom wanted us to have this or she wanted money to go here, but it's not in the will. We can't abide by that just by their say-so. So it has to be written down and it has to be in that will for us to authorize distribution.
And of course, one of my favorites that I have to deal with, it seems like once a month, is the Post-it notes on various personal property in the house. Does that work?
No, that doesn't work either. It has to be in the will.
Yeah, and people have lists, and the lists, if it's not incorporated into the will, you change it later, is no more valid than any other list that you might have.
That's for sure. And I often tell folks, if you want that person to have it, give it to them before you die. It means a lot more coming from you, personally when you're still here. Even though it's nice to receive in a will, but if you get that item, you don't have a use for it anymore, give it to that person.
Well, I actually had a family not too long ago that it was the last of the chain, 7 sets of china in their
Wow.
attic.
You can't do much with all that china.
Probably it's time to start thinking about getting rid of some of that.
That's for sure.
And so, and of course people worry about gift taxes, and Maryland is essentially almost a total non-issue anymore. You have to be incredibly wealthy before
Yes.
there's a gift tax.
It's a very, very minute percent of estates in Maryland, even in the country, that reach that threshold.
And Maryland does have an estate tax, which has been kind of not very handy for them from a business development point of view. So Maryland is in the process of reconnecting to the federal estate tax, which probably around 2020 will be about $6 million per person.
Right, yeah, that increases every year for over the next few years.
Well, Jason, as always, thanks for taking time to appear on our program.
Thanks, Mike.
More from Contemporary Retirement after these messages.
Tranquility at Fredericktown Assisted Living and Memory Care provides a warm, home-like atmosphere that promotes daily life enrichment. At Tranquility, our medical director is a geriatric physician. Our professionals support and understand the various stages associated with Alzheimer's and dementia. We have on-site physical, occupational, and speech therapists, as well as around-the-clock licensed nurses. For more information, give Tranquility at Fredericktown a call today, because everyone deserves great care. Let us do the caregiving so you and your loved one can embrace life again.
Guys, I thought you were supposed to be working in the yard.
If you haven't visited HurleyAuctions.com, you don't know what you're missing. Whether you're buying or selling, antique cars, tractors, boats, or real estate, you can do it all at HurleyAuctions.com.
Get to know Dr. Carrie Hesley at Diagnostic Imaging Services.
What I find most rewarding is caring for women through our Women's Imaging Center. We have a caring staff that will ease patients through an ultrasound, bone densitometry, breast biopsy, or mammogram. Our health team is sensitive to emotions involved in women's imaging and understands that every woman is at risk for breast cancer. Providing the community with a center that is so dedicated to breast health and the imaging needs of women is something special.
DIS Women's Imaging Center, providing women with progressive care.
Welcome to Contemporary Health Scene. Contemporary Health Scene focuses on the health issues affecting the retirement community. With me today is Dr. Robert Mazie, a radiologist, Medical Director, Diagnostic Imaging Services, and the Laser Vein Institute. Welcome to the show, Dr. Mazie.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, obviously radiology, I got that, going and get pictures taken, of course that dreaded MRI and so forth, but you know, that's not the only thing that imaging is all about.
No, we can see many things with imaging, particularly veins and blood vessels are very easy to see with ultrasound.
And of course the perception was in the past that a radiologist didn't do anything other than take pictures, but actually you do some interventional work now because of the benefits of having that imaging available.
Yes, it makes it very easy and accurate if we can see exactly what we're doing with imaging.
All right, now as we talk about the Laser Vein Institute, you know, in the past, of course, you know, people had varicose veins, venous diseases as you refer to them, and obviously right out of the gate most people didn't like them from a beauty point of view, but that's not the only reason why they have to be addressed.
No, it's a serious medical problem, and the main reason to treat them is to prevent complications down the road like bleeding, swelling, ulceration.
And I can't imagine in terms of our society where we have, you know, lots of diabetic disease and so forth, that having any sort of ulcerations is not only just sort of the classic issues, but all kinds of other side issues as well.
Yes, they can be associated with infection and lead to other problems, including blood clotting.
All right. You know, the varicose vein itself is fairly obvious, fairly apparent, bulging underneath the skin, but that's not the only manifestation of vein disease.
That's true. When the veins don't return enough blood, the leg can swell. Patients get pain and achiness. Sometimes that's the only symptom that they have.
Now, you know, is it purely genetic, or are there environmental issues that can also be the cause of this?
Well, genetics play a big part, but for anyone who's on their feet a lot or sits or stands for long periods of time, that can cause the problem as well.
You know, in the past, I guess you had the pressure socks, which sort of just kind of provided pressure to help the vein push the blood up. But how about internal veins? How do they deal with pushing up?
Well, the muscles in the body are the main support for the veins in the legs, and the calf pump pushes the blood around.
Because it's got to push it uphill back into the heart. And so, as I suspect, some of the people that have more trouble with this are people in terms of environmental that are standing a lot.
Yes, standing still. Movement is good, walking is good, but standing in one place makes the pressure go very high in the veins.
You know, in the past, the only thing you heard about is, you know, vein stripping. That doesn't sound like a very pleasant procedure.
No, that's rarely done anymore because it was painful and caused people to lose a lot of time in bed.
All right, let's have Director Greg pull up some pictures here so that we can sort of see. Now, as we look at this picture here, I assume that top right is sort of the classic varicose vein.
That's typical varicose vein, and if you see that on your leg, you almost certainly have veins that are not working properly.
But as we said earlier, it can also be a manifestation of discoloration, as we see in that middle one on the right and on the left there.
Yeah, that means your veins have not been returning enough blood probably for a long time.
And then, of course, you have the sore there, which is clearly not good.
Yes.
Now, what is this little doober?
Well, that's the laser, and that's what's revolutionized treatment, because we can put that in a vein relatively pain-free and use that to close the abnormal veins.
So what do? Just go right up that leg there and just sort of close them off as you go up?
Exactly. It's like starting an IV, and we thread the catheter up to the highest point of abnormality and treat from there.
Now, and I gather it's sort of heat treatment? Is sort of.
Yes, it's focused heat treatment, but the vein is numbed with lidocaine and patients don't feel it.
And so then what's it do? Does it shut off the vein then?
It causes an inflammation on the inside of the vein and causes the vein just to close, just like clogging a pipe.
All right, and then that's where the body then adjusts and finds other healthier veins to return the blood then?
That's right, and the blood will just be shunted to the deeper veins, which will handle it
So we have a before picture here that obviously cannot be it's got to be painful and not good, right?
That can lead to a lot of problems.
And
yes.
so this was an actual patient that came and manifested the symptoms in this way, and so they received a laser treatment then in your office, relatively pain-free, and
Yes.
then, all right, and then the consequence of that is here.
That's right. And in a few weeks' time, most of the abnormal veins decompress, and patients feel a lot better.
All right, and as we were talking earlier, part of the problem is the exterior veins do not have muscle support. So once it's redirected to healthier veins, it's almost as essential as having the pressure socked, except muscle is providing for that.
That's exactly what happens.
So if a person has a question regarding these sorts of things, how can they find out more information? How can they get a hold of you?
Well, they can call me at the Laser Vein Institute at 301-714-4488 or lasermyveins.com. We have a website and we can interact that way.
Dr. Mazey, it sounds like a great program. Thanks for appearing on our program.
Thanks for having me.
More from Contemporary Retirement after these messages.
People don't realize it takes a lot to care for a family member in your home. John's dad was very headstrong, so I think that was a lot for him to get over and try to come to terms with that he had terminal illness. I would recommend everybody to get hospice involved at the get-go. When you first learn about it, get it set up. It's going to make it, I mean, it's terrible what you're going through already, but it's going to make it easier for you in the long run because we couldn't have done it without them.
Call Hospice today. Hospice of Washington County, when time matters most.
I have wanted to be a teacher ever since first grade. Without the Mary and Ruth Smith Scholarship, I would not be successful as a growing adult.
Do you wish to make a difference in the lives of others? You can, and you don't have to be wealthy to impact future generations. Start your legacy at the Community Foundation and impact lives, just as Mary and Ruth Smith have done.
Thank you to the Community Foundation for believing in me and providing me the opportunity to become successful with my goals.
Contemporary Retirement is sponsored in part by a grant from Albright, Krumbacher, Mao, and Eitel. Call Albright, Krumbacher, Mao, and Eitel, your trusted advisors for business, personal, and estate planning at 301-739-5300.
Welcome to the Making Sense feature on Contemporary Retirement. Making Sense focuses on the financial issues affecting the retirement community. With me today is Pete Alexander, a partner in the regional accounting firm of Albright, Krumbacher, Mao, and Eitel with offices in Hagerstown and Martinsburg. Welcome to the show, Pete.
Great to be here, Mike.
Pete, we did a segment last week on old, and we want to continue that talking about old bonds. There was a period of time there that you could convert E bonds to H bonds, but that time is past.
Yeah, there's no longer a conversion period of those types of bonds. So if you do have E-bonds, you can cash them in. They're not bad. They don't go bad. They don't go stale. Eventually they stop paying some interest, but you can still cash them in. But there is no conversion period where you can convert them in a tax-free type of rollover environment.
And of course, it didn't turn out to be all that great a deal because those H bonds are paying a market interest rate right now that is very, very low. And so at the end of the day, you're really making a substandard investment in exchange for not having to pay the taxes.
And that's a lot of investments out there that people hang on to. They hang on to investments. Maybe they bought a dog stock for $1,000. Maybe that stock is worth $600, but they don't want to sell it because they think there's some type of gain out there or some type of tax. Maybe even you bought it for $1,000 and it's worth $2,000, but it's 20 years it took it to go from $1,000 to $2,000, and you don't want to sell it because you don't want to pay tax on the $1,000. But what you forget is you're foregoing a better earning opportunity on that $2,000.
I oftentimes tell people it's a very simple discipline for it. If you look at the price of that investment and you wouldn't pay that for it today, then you need to sell it.
Yeah, you need to unload bad investments to get them into good investments, even if that means paying a little bit of tax. Because remember, most of your investments, other than bonds, bond interest is taxed at ordinary rates, though the elder community is often in lower rates, but stocks are taxed at a capital gain rate. And the capital gain rates right now are still quite generous. They don't go up higher than 20%. They could be as low as 0%, and most people in the retirement community probably pay 15% on federal. So you're not losing a lot in taxes if it's a capital gain environment.
All right, and then we have another trap that people look at is they own a mutual fund. They paid $1,000 for it 10 years ago. It's now worth $2,000. And many times they did not take the dividends. The dividends were reinvested, and so they think they're going to have $1,000 worth of gain upon the sale of that mutual fund. In most instances, what do we find?
Yeah, I mean, what I would say almost 80% of the people have their mutual fund dividends reinvested. So you might pay $1,000 for a mutual fund. Each year you get in the mail a statement saying you've earned $10, $20, $100 of dividends on that mutual fund. Well, you never got the check. If you never got that check, or your brokerage account never physically took that check, then that mutual fund check was used to buy more of that same mutual fund. That's called reinvestment. So after 5 years, if you got $100 of dividends and you got it reported to you, you picked it up and paid tax. That means that $500 adds to that initial $1,000 basis. So quite honestly, a lot of people that paid $1,000 for a mutual fund, the mutual fund could be worth $2,000. They may actually have a loss on that mutual fund, or if nothing else, a very small gain because of all the dividends reinvested.
And once again, they're making a decision to keep an investment that they don't particularly care for because they're under the impression that there may be tax liability, which may or may not be true.
Right. I mean, you don't often want to keep an investment just because of a tax situation, but if you do, you want to make sure you're making the decision based on facts. Because if the thing doesn't have a tax situation attached to it, then you're making an investment decision based on a false idea. So you need to get informed before you make that decision.
And then, of course, we have the same issue with retirees with very low income, not wanting to pay any taxes, so they buy Maryland state municipal bonds.
Yeah, that's a good one. I mean, remember, the reason Maryland State or any state can sell bonds at a lower interest rate is because those bonds are tax-free. But that tax-freeness, if you're not paying tax, does you no good. So if you don't have any tax or savings, why get a lower interest rate to get a tax savings?
And people automatically think that it's a benefit, but actually mathematically a person has to have about a 30% tax bracket in order for a municipal bond to make sense in terms of yielding higher than a taxable bond.
Right, because your municipal bond is going to pay 30% less. Just a real easy example, if you can go get 1% on a CD out there, then that means your municipal bond is probably going to pay slightly less than 0.7%. It's going to pay 30% less, so if you're not saving 30% in taxes by holding the municipal bond, then there's no need to buy that municipal bond.
And so we just see these traps all the time. People assume it's axiomatic that you gain always by not paying taxes, but in reality, if you're making no interest on the bonds because they've matured, or you're buying a municipal bond when you don't pay taxes, you're not gaining anything. You're in fact giving away return.
Yeah, taxes aren't the worst thing, but losing money is the worst thing.
Pete, as always, thanks for taking time to appear on our program.
Great to be here.
Thank you from Contemporary Retirement.
Remember a more carefree time? Leave your insurance worries to us, Wright Gardner. Call or visit our website to learn how we can make insurance simple and more affordable.
These days, it seems like everything's online, and filling out claim forms and receiving and paying bills online isn't always easiest. That's why we at Quality First Insurance encourage you to just give us a call. Let us help.
Hi there, I'm Paul Sweeney with Quality First Insurance, and it's still just this simple. Our offices are open every weekday where you'll be able to call and speak to real, live people.
No detail was missed. I'm so glad that I turned to Quality First Insurance.
I've recommended Quality First Insurance to my friends who've been just as satisfied.
If you're not happy with what you're paying for Medigap, or more importantly, not happy with your service, give us a try. We're locally owned, and we take the time to provide you with the best. We are Quality First Insurance, and our mission is to provide quality products to quality people. Pick up the phone and give us a call today at 800-745-1411.